Hello, everyone. I'm in Bucharest, Romania, about 2/3 of the way through the European leg of my Beyond Order tour, which seems to be going very nicely. I've spent some time over the last few weeks, it's June 16th, 2022, by the way, writing a couple of articles for the Telegraph, one of which I'm going to read to you today, called Butchers and Liars. We are sacrificing our children on the altar of a malicious far-left ideology. The medical profession is crumbling in response to radical transgender activists. There's good evidence that many ancient societies sacrificed children to their gods. Parents in ancient Phoenician colonies in Carthage, Sicily, Sardinia, and Malta slew their offspring prior to cremating them, hoping that the gods would hear their voices and bless them. We are rightly appalled by this, though sometimes I wonder whether we understand child sacrifice far more than we'd like to admit. I saw a video the other day featuring an American surgeon bragging that he had performed more than 3,000 double mastectomies on young women who had paid for gender reassignment. Individuals confused, one might say encouraged, by those who profit from it into believing that their adolescent emotional trials can be cured and happiness reign forever if they subject themselves to this brutal practice. And it is brutal. A process that often includes not only the aforementioned mastectomies, but other appalling surgical processes. Orchiectomy, that's castration in blunter language, the removal of the uterus, the demolition of the musculature of the forearm to make what is not a penis, but must be referred to as such.
Stopping it there. Okay, wow. 3,000 surgeries and you're proud of that? That's sick. And you remember in What is a Woman documentary that I reacted to with Matt Walsh, if you haven't seen it, go watch it, where he didn't talk about the double vasectomy, the removal of the breast, but he talked about the bottom surgery was like, what, $50,000 or $70,000 a pop? 3,000 surgeries? How much money is that, Mr. Doctor? And he talks about, like, you know, these kids, these adolescent girls and boys being told that their emotional teenage woes would be cured by transitioning, but they're not being told that their emotional teenage woes is just normal. It's a normal part of growing up. It's a normal part of puberty. It is a normal part of childhood, adolescenthood, and teenhood, and should actually just be embraced and go through it, because it makes you who you are as an adult. Girlhood, boyhood, it makes you who you are as an adult to let yourself go through that. To go through the trials and tribulations of becoming a woman and a man. I mean, not surgically, biologically, naturally, you know what I mean? And I like how he brought up the whole sacrificial, you know, in ancient times, how parents would sacrifice their kids, and how we haven't really changed that much. We just sacrifice it to different gods, like the progressive ideology cult god, right? And also pointed out that just because someone's a parent doesn't mean they won't sacrifice their child, because it happens all the time, and it still happens in some cultures today. But anyway, let's continue.
All of that, for someone purporting to be a physician to perform this on children, to me at least, seems like something worthy of a prison sentence. Whatever happened to the doctrine expressed by the ancient language as primum non nocere, first, do no harm? The Hippocratic Oath has been replaced by a delusion, a belief that can be summarized as, by blocking the puberty of children and then surgically altering them, we are only restoring what is theirs by right. A child's feelings are the final arbiters of their reproductive destiny, and any attempt to contest their gender identity risks increasing their proclivity for suicide. Lies. 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 Then, butchery. Changing standards. Psychologists, those in my own personal field of medicine, have also surrendered to this groupthink. The American Psychological Association's Task Force on Guidelines for Psychological Practice with Transgender and Gender Nonconforming People, TGNC, insist that psychologists and other professional counselors offer trans-affirmative care, starting with such niceties as displaying TGNC affirmative resources in waiting areas.
First of all, you can tell Dr. Jordan Peterson is pissed. He is mad. We like when Jordan Peterson is mad. We like him when he's soft and, emotional and he gets deep, but we also like when he's mad because he speaks the truth. You know what I mean? He's not going to lie. He never tell a lie. Do not lie. That is one of his principles. And he refuses to bend the knee and he refuses to go along with the ideology just because it's easier to do. That's cowardice behavior. And Dr. Jordan Peterson is nothing. He's not a coward. He's going to speak his mind. And we also saw in What is a Woman documentary by Mike Walsh how a lot of trans activists and doctors and these therapists who are really only doing this for the dollar and for praise, I guess, is that they try to make it seem like if you don't allow teenagers or children to transition, then they're going to have a higher rate of suicide. Suicide rates skyrocket in the transgender community once they transition. It's not before, it's once they transition. And there is absolutely no evidence and no data to prove that they're committing suicide because of bullying or transphobia. I'm not saying bullying and transphobia does not exist, but that's not correlating with the hike in suicide rates when it comes to the transgender community. But what it does show is that what we saw in the documentary, about 7 to 10 years or so after transitioning, is the most dangerous when it comes to suicidal idealization or actually suicide attempts, whether they're failed or achieved. So no, you're not actually you're not helping these kids. You're actually speeding them up to the point of maybe taking their own lives. And he's talking about butchering them up and carving them up, and also you are allowing children to make the decision to not only remove parts of their body, but to sterilize themselves. Very high chance of sterilizing themselves, and an extremely high chance of never allowing them to be able to actually experience sexual pleasure. You're taking their ability to experience sexual pleasure away from them. So you're just creating a bunch of sexless, sterilized communities. You know what I mean? It's just really sad, and I cannot imagine. And of course, this trans craze heavily affects young girls and affects young men, but still, and I'm not trying to downplay or belittle the surgery that girls go through, especially if they get bottom surgery to become a man, because again, it's not a penis. It's just not. It's not ever going to function like a penis. You're going to have problems going to the bathroom and urinating. You're not going to receive any pleasure from it. You're going to be using a penile pump probably the rest of your life. You're going to have medication for the rest of your life to keep not having infections. However, I would imagine the reversal of a bottom surgery from female to male is a lot easier to do a bottom surgery of reversal when it comes to male to female, and also the removal of the breast. I know breast implants are not real breasts. You'll never be able to breastfeed your child, and the scars are still there to remind you. However, you can reconstruct it to a way where it's satisfactory and it looks like breasts, right? But when it comes to, again, young men removing their penis, it's gone. There is no coming back from that. There is no reversal from that. Our medical evolution or invention or technology has not gone that far. They do not have the means or the warehouse or whatever. They do not have, there is no penile replacement or transplants coming along. Once it's gone, it's gone. And I could not imagine becoming a man and realizing you do not actually identify as a woman, and you don't even identify as someone who wants or desires a vagina, and knowing that you can never get it back. It is done. The coming to the full revelation of that and having to accept that and live with that has to be so fucking hard. I actually feel so bad for this generation because it's gonna hit them like a ton of fucking bricks. Let's continue.
Practitioners are also asked to examine how their language, e.g., use of incorrect pronouns and names, may reinforce the gender binary in overt or subtle and unintentional ways. These guidelines first read like a manual of indoctrination written by Marxist ideologues, and second, like a document designed to undermine and destroy the practice of therapy itself. But at an alarming rate, these guidelines have transformed themselves into punitive laws governing what a psychologist or counselor may say and think in relation to their clients. Let me make myself perfectly clear. Speaking as a professional, whether in America, Britain, or anywhere, it is not the place of a therapist to affirm or conversely to deny the identity of anyone whom they admit into their care. People come to see a therapist often after long and painful deliberation because they are suffering, confused, or both. The job of that therapist is to listen, to question, and to proceed with due caution, neither providing cheap advice and thereby stealing their clients' successes or heaping failure upon them, nor assuming special knowledge of the proper outcome for a given individual. There is simply no way I would ever tell a 15-year-old adolescent that she is absolutely correct if sometimes she feels more masculine than feminine, however that feeling might emerge, and that if she feels that surgery is the answer, then recommend hormones that day. I would instead spend many weeks, even perhaps many months or years, listening to her unwrap her story, using caution as my watchword, and help her to come to some thorough and well-developed understanding of both her autobiographical history and her destiny.
So technically, if Dr. Jordan Peterson was to speak to anybody who was suffering from an identity crisis or struggling with their identity, he would actually do his fucking job. Affirmation therapy has to be some of the most laziest forms of therapy I've ever seen in my life, because you're doing nothing but affirming. It's basically a coddle section. I'm coddling you, I'm stroking your ego, and I'm just telling you that you're right. That you're not doing anything. You're not assessing or analyzing or breaking anything down. And not only that, we also learned this from Matt Walsh, what is a woman documentary, is that this sort of spearheading to make sure you hurry up and get that surgery and hurry up and change your gender, not even giving you the time to rethink what you're doing. You get an hour of coddling affirmations therapy, and you get straight to the hormones and scheduling the surgery. You're not even giving these kids the time to go, wait a minute, let me think about this. Let me chew on it. You're not telling them that, hey, maybe socially live like the other gender for a year, and if that feels good for you, then come back. That's what they used to do. So you have to socially live like the gender you think you are and feel you are, and if that feels right to you, then come back. In between, continuing having therapy sessions to make sure you're not actually just suffering from some other mental health issues, which a lot of these people are, and being misdiagnosed or undiagnosed. But anyway, let's continue.
That is not affirmation, and neither is it denial. How could I possibly dare to do either when someone has come to me because they are mixed up and desperate, a state of twinned experience indicating a profound confusion about identity itself? Radical new guidelines. I am focusing on the American Psychological Association, APA, because it is the body charged with establishing the norms and ideals for clinical practice in the most populous democracy on earth. Principles that will and are spread around the West more broadly, including in Britain. Some of their guidelines are appalling enough to deserve dissection. Guideline 1. Psychologists understand that gender is a non-binary construct that allows for a range of gender identities, and that a person's gender identity may not align with sex assigned at birth. I don't understand this radical postmodern definition of gender, one that rests on a person's deeply felt or inherent sense of being one sex over another, regardless of biology. Psychologically, it is indisputably the case that a non-trivial proportion of males have a feminine temperament, which essentially means that they experience higher levels of negative emotion, such as anxiety and the analogs of pain, grief, frustration, disappointment, depression, and are more agreeable, compassionate, polite than typical males. And equally true that a non-trivial proportion of females have a masculine temperament. But this does not change how, objectively, professionals should measure a person's gender. Psychologists once cared if measurement followed standard practices of validity and reliability. Try reading, for example, a document published by the APA itself in 2014, where you will learn that a psychologist worthy of his salt is obliged to utilize constructs, i.e., terms such as gender, in a technically appropriate manner. This means, at the very least, that fundamental attributes must be measurable and measured properly. But all that goes out the window when we're discussing the magic of gender now, which is entirely subjectively defined, even though that insistence indubitably contravenes the earlier standards.
I like that Dr. Jordan Peterson has pointed this out, and he's pointed this out in multiple videos when it comes to gender fluidity. And I like how he used the word non-trivial. There is a non-trivial amount of men who have more feminine tendencies and characteristics and personalities, and it's same for women. I think he's used the statistics of 1 out of 10. I like that he said that, because a lot of people like to act like Dr. Jordan Peterson is transphobic, or he denies that people do have more fluid gender identities or expressions, and he's also mentioned that there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But again, I like the word that he used, non-trivial, because I feel like we still have to acknowledge that not everybody fits into a perfect box of gender, men or women. They shouldn't be shamed for not fitting into that box, because I see that a lot with conservatives, Republican, traditionals, of like, women need to be like this and men need to be like this, and this is what masculinity is and this is what femininity is, and if you don't fit those things, then you're a weirdo and you're strange and blah 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 blah. Again, to me, there's nothing wrong with being a weirdo or being strange. I think those are good things. However, I keep going back to the non-trivial word, because he's making it known like there is a large portion of people that don't fit into gender norms, and that is okay. But the answer isn't to change their sex or change their gender or carve them up or have surgery, take their ability to have kids away, take their ability to achieve sexual pleasure away, cut off body parts. That's not the answer. The thing is, like, our society keeps going to the extremes. We lived in a society at one point where girls weren't even allowed to wear pants. You were seen as a witch if you had any male characteristics, and men were beat up and bullied and killed if they had any feminine characteristics, and we fought against those things, right? And now we live in a society where it's like, look, there's feminine men and there's masculine women, and that's okay, let them live their lives. But we went from that to being like, oh, you're a tomboy? All right, cut off your tits. You know what I mean? Oh, you like Barbies? Cut off your dick. You know what I mean? Like, we just go too far all the time. I'm so glad I'm not a Gen Zer, because I grew up a tomboy. Like, I'm in a black family, so it would have never happened. Like, black parents don't really play that like that. But still, if I was a little bit more lighter and had progressive parents, me being a tomboy would have been me losing my fucking tits. But anyway, let's continue.
But feelings uber alles, folks, and it's no joke, particularly if you're 15 and have undergone surgery that makes you incapable of reproducing, often to foster someone else's sense of moral superiority or sense of self-attributed compassion, a word that increasingly makes me shudder when I encounter it. New doctrines. Psychologists are also now adopting the simple-minded and anything but revolutionary doctrine of intersectionality without question. And what is that doctrine? Nothing more than the claim that human beings are characterized by identities that span multiple dimensions. Any given person has a race, ethnicity, sex, temperament, 5 dimensions there alone, intelligence level, etc. We've known that forever. It's only became a hot cultural item since fools noted the obvious fact that minority status might be additive or multiplicative. I hate to even point out given that anyone with any sense whatsoever also knew, without any statistical training, that it was possible to be of Latino extraction, say, or even Latin X, to use that absurd, demeaning, and patronizing term, and female simultaneously. One cannot question this, however, without fear of being ostracized by one's colleagues. Note the chilling wording of Guideline 7. Psychologists understand the need to promote social change that reduces the negative effects of stigma on the health and well-being of TGNC people. In summary, if you're not an activist and one of our activists, then you better be watching over your shoulder. So what should govern my behavior as a therapist and your expectations as a client? The answer to that is whatever the activists deem a priority at their whim. And remember that in court, folks. Active malevolence.
Stopping it there. I like that he pointed out that a lot of these doctors and these therapists and these affirming therapists and these activists, it's a fucking mosquito. They're not necessarily doing it because they care about the people. They're doing it because they want to self-grandize. I'm so good. I'm so virtuous. I'm so passionate. A lot of these woke progressives are like this, and they do so much more damage and harm than they actually do good because, again, it's not about the people. It's about them. It is extremely selfish. It's extremely self-centered. I want to feel like the good guy, right? It's instead of like standing in actual truth and reality. Anyway, let's continue.
I'm increasingly ashamed to be a clinical psychologist, given the utter cowardice, spinelessness, and apathy that characterizes many colleagues, and even more so my professional associations. At least in 20 years, when we all come to regret this terrible social experiment, I may be able to say, I said no when they all came to insist that we participate in the sacrifice of our children. Other countries, and Britain in particular, must not make the same mistakes as in the US and elsewhere. I cannot consent to what we are doing. I cannot abide by what have become the doctrines of my discipline. I believe that the acts of the medical professional rushing to disfigure, sterilize, and harm young people with what are clearly ill-advised, dangerous, and experimental procedures cross the line from do no harm to outright harm. Only if we bury our heads in the sand will sterility, impaired or absent sexual function, complex reactions to poorly understood hormones, expense, and intermingled with all of that, misery and confusion continue for countless young people. We must address the threat posed to the integrity of the entire education system, as well as indoctrination into the same philosophy that spawned this surgical enterprise and the APA guidelines grows. It threatens general public trust that our peace and prosperity depends upon. And, by the way, it will most definitely be the case that a disproportionate number of children freed from their hypothetical gender confusion would have grown up to be physically intact and fully functional gay adults. Need I point out that this unpalatable fact makes a mockery of any claim that the extended alphabet world of the LGBTQ plus coterie in any sense constitutes a homogeneous and unified community. We have crossed the line from ideological possession to active malevolence, and we are multiplying our sin. There's an intersection for you, by attributing our appalling actions to compassion. Heaven help us. Truly.
Wow. He's mad, and I think a lot of people are upset, and I'm glad that he wrote that article or that open letter. I am glad Dr. Joey Peterson is a man that exists today. His voice is very much needed, and he's right that Again, it is out there. You can Google it yourself if you don't believe me. Majority of people who actually identify or actually suffer from gender dysphoria, actual gender dysphoria, which is a mental disorder, which is the very minority amount of people who actually experience that. Within that tiny community that experience gender dysphoria, the majority of them would grow out of it once they pass through adolescence. And most of them would have just been gay men and women. A lot of people have pointed out that this sort of fast-track transgender trend thing that's going on is actually kind of homophobic and actually kind of misogynist, because you have a bunch of young girls who no longer want to be women and want to be men, and then you have a bunch of people who would have just been gay trying to change their sex so they're no longer identifying as homosexual. Anyway, not change their gender, not sex, but anyway, you know what I meant. Tell me guys, what do you think in the comment section below? What he said, what I said in the comment section below. Please like, comment, subscribe. Hit that bell to get the notifications when I do upload. All of that really does help with the algorithm, guys. And if you'd like to support this channel further, you can donate. My PayPal and Cash App link is in the description box below and also in the comment section. Of course, it helps, but you don't have to. You can just like, comment, and subscribe. Another great way to support this channel is either join my brand new membership program, different levels, different tiers, different perks, or you can visit my brand new merch shop. Links down below and links to all of the internal platforms I'm on, my socials, all the ways to contact me for business, and all the ways to support me is always in the links down below. I also have a second travel vlog channel. I travel as a lifestyle and I live abroad. If you'd like to know where I am in the world, you can go to the description box below and also in the comment section. Hit the link, go subscribe to my travel vlog channel, and or follow me on my travel Instagram. My stories are usually what's most up to date. And you guys have an amazing day. Bye.